Hello Atlas coders, welcome in today's video. In today's video we will build a single page application, one page website just by using HTML, CSS and just some JavaScript, not too much, only 3 lines of JavaScript. So this is the website that we are going to be building. We will build a 100% view height header. We will have here this nice animation. If we click on it, it's going to take us to an about section with some avatar, some nice animation for the button. And here, as you can see, if we scroll down, there is a nice looking section which shows our working process. It has some nice animation as well. The next section is going to be just some forms, some extra information about the website. And finally, we will have a footer that's going to contain some social networks links. I just would like to mention this website, it's going to be 100% responsive, which means that we will have this hamburger here that's going to show us the menu. We can scroll down and you can see here this about page is going to be 100% responsive, as you can see here. So enough talking, let's get our hands dirty. So first thing, you can go to the repo in the link in the description here. I'm going to put the link of this project repository so you can actually download the zip file of the whole project. And as well, we will need this README file for what we're going to be building today. So far so good. So let's firstly go to Visual Studio Code. You can install it. It's 100% free, or you can use whatever code editor that you find yourself at ease while using it. So here I just have an empty folder with images that's gonna contain one image, which is the avatar that we are gonna be using it. So we're gonna start from scratch. So the first thing we will do here is to create a new file, and let's call it index.html. Okay, so here we have a nice thing that Visual Studio Code provides for us, which is the image abbreviations. So if we just type exclamation mark, that's going to generate for us this image abbreviation. If we click on tab, it's going to generate for us the doc type for HTML. So let's hit save, Control S, and we can go now to this here, right click and open with live server. So this is actually, it's going to run a live server for us. So we can just copy this link here and paste it over here. Okay, so it seems that there is something wrong, which is the index.html. I put it inside the images. We don't want to do that. We want to move it to here, not the images. So let's now refresh, and as you can see, we can see our document. So let's start by changing this, for example, to portfolio. If we hit save here, as you can see, we won't have to refresh over and over again. And that's good about live server. Again, if you want to get live server, you can just go here, search for extensions, and you will find a live server. If you type here live server, as you can see here, and you can install it. Okay, so far so good. So let's start off with the HTML. So the first section here, it's going to be start the header. With Alt Shift down, we will generate the same code here, and let's say end header. So let's make a header tag. Inside the header tag, we're going to be making a nav bar. So this is going to be our nav bar actually. Inside the nav bar here, we will have a div. Let's call it logo. And inside the logo, we can put whatever logo we want. I'm going to choose in, for example, Atlas Coding. So AC. As you can see here, we will see it. If we go down here, let's type, for example, our unordered list, so UL, and inside the UL, we will make some couple LIs, and inside those LIs, we're going to make some links, so A. For the href, let's just make an empty link, and here, let's say we're going to have home. So this UL here, let's just give it a class name, for example. which is going to be list, and maybe we can, you know what, let's just give it list. So here let's make a couple of links. So we have the home, the about, the contact as well, and another one for the blog. Okay, so home, let's make this one here about, let's make this one here contact, and the last one here, let's make it blog. Okay, so far so good. So for example, because we're going to have an about page, we're going to have a contact page, we can actually use these divs here to take us to these sections that we're going to have on the website, since it's going to be one page website. So what else do we need? So if we take a look here, we will need for the header to have a header content, for example, that's going to contain this heading and these hashtags. Okay, so we have a nav bar first. So now let's go down here and let's make a header, for example, content like this here. And inside the header content here, the first thing we're going to make is the h1, and that h1 is going to have atlas coding, for example. Okay, here I misspelled it. I put 2 O's. Perfect. Down there, we're going to be using, for example, another unordered list for this here. So an ordered list, and inside it, we're going to just have a couple of LIs. So let's make, for example, HTML, Alt-Shift down, CSS, one for SAS, one for JavaScript, and one for React.js, for example. So this one here is going to have CSS. The other one, for example, is going to have SAS. The fourth one, it's going to have JavaScript, and the last one here, it's going to have React.js. Okay, and as you can see here, we have them as well. So the last thing that we're going to need to complete our header is to make the arrow down. So let's make, for example, an arrow down div, which is going to contain our A. That's actually, it's going to go nowhere for now. And let's make inside it an I with FA, and let's add FA arrow down. So these classes here, they are font awesome classes. We're going to be using it as a library actually for displaying our fonts. So from where you can get it, you can actually go to this repo that I'm going to put the link of in the description, and we can go here. As you can see, this is the link to Font Awesome. So copy here. Now we can't see our logo, our icon, because we still haven't actually integrated the link to Font Awesome. So let's Control V here, Control S, and as you can see here, now we can see this link. So I think it's enough HTML. Let's start messing up with some CSS. So let's go back here, let's add a new file, let's call it, for example, styles.css. Okay, so inside this file here, first of all, let's link them both. So we can go here and type another link, style href, and href, it's going to just have styles.css since both of them are in the same folder. So let's go to the styles, and first things first, let's give, for example, just a shot to see if that's working. So background color, let's make it red, and yeah, boom, that's working. So it's 100% linked. So let's go back here. I already did that. Actually, this is the font that we're going to be using, and these are just some colors. So let's just copy them and let's paste them right here. So as you can see here, you might find a problem with these font families because we're not going to be using them here in the CSS. We're going to be using them actually with the body. So let's go back here and let's start messing up with the CSS. So let's first of all use some comments to make our file look more and more readable. So here we're gonna just import the fonts, for example. And here we're gonna just make in some variables. If you don't know how to use variables in CSS, that's completely fine. They are very, very easy. So here, let's say making variables. Okay. And actually, to make variables, all you need to do is just double dots here with root, and then inside the root you just need two hyphens, and then the name of the variable that you want. For now, I'm using this variable just to hold the color code that we're going to be using in our website. I highly recommend actually to use variables. They are so useful. So the first thing we're going to start off with is just to make some global styling. So this global styling is what I'm using actually whenever I start editing my websites. So global styling. Okay. And for the global styling, first of all, let's select all the elements, and all the elements I want to give them a margin of 0. Okay, so let's go back to our portfolio here, and as you can see, we have removed the margin. So let's see what we have done so far. So if we just uncomment this here, margin 0, to prevent the default margin that comes with the HTML elements, let's make a padding as well of 0, so that we remove the default padding, and let's make a box sizing, border box. And another thing that we're going to add to all the elements is the scroll behavior, and let it be smooth. So this scroll behavior here, smooth, is how we can do this here. As you can see, smooth scrolling, as you can see here. So another thing we're going to do here is the body. So now for the whole body, we will just take this font family of Roboto, and let's bring it here. Okay, so now the only thing remaining is this one here, so let's take it as a cut to use it later on. I think we're going to be probably using it with this H1. So let's go down here. We're still on our global styling. So for the unordered list, we're going to make the list style type to be none, and for the A's, actually we want to make the text decoration to be none. Okay, so let me explain what we have done so far. So for this unordered list here, we remove the points. This is what the list style type does. And for the text decoration, we should have an underlined, underlined links. So when we do the text decoration on, we remove those lines. Another thing we're going to add as well is for the text decoration, and since most of the links they're going to be with white colors, let's give them a color of FFF, so we're not going to be able to see them here, as you can see, because we give them that color. Okay, so far so good. So let's make a container that's going to actually contain our app, and let's give it a width, for example, of 75%. And what else are we gonna be doing is a margin of 0 auto, and another thing is the max width, so that it's not go too wide, and let it be 1200 pixels. Okay, so we're not using the container yet because we're not going to be using it for this header. I think we're going to probably use it for this header with the nav bar. Probably, yeah, I think so. So I think I'll already include that or not. No, I didn't. So everything here, because we're going to need it to be aligned, as you can see here, the container, we will need it for our navbar. So I'm going to wrap everything inside the navbar with a div. Not the navbar as well, as a whole, but just this from logo inside the navbar. Yeah, these both of these elements. So we're gonna here be making a container, and inside that container we're gonna have actually everything. So okay, so far so good. So as you can see here, this moved because we give it a width of 75%, and margin 0 auto, it takes the whole container to the center of the document. So let's give it a background actually to see what we are doing here. Red, and as you can see, this is our container. Okay, did you see what we did? So let's just comment this out to see what we are doing. As you can see here, so we give it a width of 75%, the margin of 0 auto, which means that it's going to move the whole space to the middle. As you can see here, center. So I think that this is everything we're going to be in need for our global styling. And let's get to the header. Okay, so here let's start header styling. Okay, so for the header styling, the first thing, of course, that we're going to start off with is the header itself. So for the header, we're going to give it a width of 100%, a height of 100 VH, which means the viewport height, whatever screen that we're gonna be into, we will take 100% of the screen. What else we will be doing is the background. So the background here, we're going to be using not the background color, the background, and we're going to be using linear gradient. And here where we're going to be using those variables that we put on the top. So as you can see here, we have a variable called color gradient 1, and we have another variable called color gradient 2. So we're going to be using both of them here. First of all, let's specify a degree for our gradient and let it be 50 degrees. And what are the colors that we are going to be using? So I'm going to be using the color gradient, the color gradient 1. Actually, we have to use variables. And inside that variables, we're going to be using color gradient 1 and not color gradient 1. Let's use color gradient 2 with another one of color gradient 1 and another one of a variable of color gradient 2. So let's take a look now, and as you can see, we will have this nice looking background. Okay, so if you are wondering how I turn my code from those long lines to this, I'm using Prettier here. You can install it as well, the same way we saw how to install live code, live server. So you can install Prettier as well. That's gonna make your code well arranged just by using Alt-Shift-F. Okay, so let's go to the color and let's make it FFF, which means a white. So let's now remove this background color. We don't need it anymore. What else we should do? Okay, so let's start with the display of the header. So let's make it red and perfect. And we're gonna place the items to be center. Okay, so everything will go to the center. What else we're gonna be doing is the overflow. I'll let it be hidden. We don't want anything to look outside that container. And the position, it's going to be relative. You might be wondering why we're going to be using a relative position, because this navbar, we're going to give it, we want to take it out of the container of the page. So we're going to be using a position of absolute, and we want, when we use the absolute, when the children has a relative, when the children has an absolute position and the parent have a relative position, it will never go out of the parent container. I hope that I actually explained that very well. So let's go to the nav here. For the nav, we will make it a position of not in red, of absolutes. Okay, as you can see now. And what else do we want to do here is we want to give it a width of 100%, and we want to make it from left to be 0, and from the top to be with around 40 or 50 pixels. So let's make it 40 pixels, as you can see here. So now we have the navbar. Don't worry about this header content. It's going to be in the center, as well as we're gonna set this arrow down to position absolute as well. So the only element that's gonna be recognized by the whole header, it's gonna be this header content. Okay, so let's move now to the nav dot container, the container that we made, and let's give it a display of flex, and to justify the content to be space between, and let's give it an align the items to be center. So as you can see here, we use the display flex, which means we're going to take 100% of the container. Okay, we use justify the content space between. Since we have only two elements, we're going to make a space between them, and here aligned items to be in the center, which means this logo, it's going to be always in the center of this nav bar as well. Okay, if you don't know display, the flex display, I'm gonna probably make another video of the layouts, displays, grids, since we're gonna be using them a lot. Okay, so this is the nav container. Let's move on to the Nav Dot Logo. So for the logo, I'm just gonna actually give it a font size of 2.3 rams. Okay, I like to use rams actually rather than pixels. If you don't know rams as well, I'm gonna probably make a video for them. We simply use them. They are better, way better than pixels. Okay, so now we're in the logo here. Let's give it a text transform of uppercase. Okay, and what else can we do here is to make up the letter spacing. For example, mine's 10px. As you can see, it's going to give it that nice looking logo. And the cursor, let's make it pointer. So as you can see here, we make the cursor pointer just to make it like it's a link. So what else? Let's now move to the unordered list. So nav ul, and for the unordered list, we're going to just give it a display of flex to make them all in one line next to the other. So now the nav ul allies, we're going to give it a margin left of, let's make it 20 pixels, for example. And we want to give them, no, let's move now to the links. So nav ul allies is links. Now we want to give them a color of yeah, let's use CCC. No, that's too dark. So let's make it a little bit lighter, like so. Okay, that's good. So this is the color, and this is the text transform. So the text transform is going to be capitalized. Okay, so as you can see, the first letter it's going to be uppercase. Now we want home here to have a color which is different than the other links, since we're in the home page. So let's go home here, and let's give it the a class name of active link. For example, this active link here, it's gonna just be a class called active link, and it's gonna be just the color of white. So as you can see here, now home is different than the other colors. Maybe we can make them a little bit darker so that you can see. Okay, so now what we will have, we're about actually to complete the header. So we will have a header h1, and let's give it the font family actually that we have here, which is the railway. Okay, perfect. What else can we do here? Aside from the font family, we want the font size to be a little bit bigger. So the font size to be 3 rams, for example, as you can see here. And what else we want to do here is the letter spacing. Let it be 5 pixels, and we want to make the border top to be 1 px solid CSS. Okay, and let's just make it a little bit transparent just by dragging this down so that it's not way appeared so much. So here let's Alt Shift down and make a border bottom as well with the same things. So as you can see here. So what else? We definitely need a padding of 10 pixels, 15. Let's just make it 15 pixels from top and bottom, but 0 from right and left, as you can see here. And what else we need is definitely we need to push down this unordered list. So let's give it a margin bottom of let's make it 20 pixels, 30 pixels. Let's make it just 20 pixels. Okay, so far so good. So now let's move on to the header content UL. So we can just go header dot header content UL. Okay, and we want first thing the display to be flex. Okay, that's not working. Why it's not working? Because I misspelled the header here. Okay, so now as you can see here, we have a display of flex. Let's justify the content to give them a space between as well, so that we will have that margin between all the hashtags. And yeah, that's it. We can give them a space between or space around, it doesn't really matter. Okay, so now we have finished the unordered list. Let's move on to the allies. Let's move on to the allies now. So header dot header content, the header content UL allies. So for the allies here, we're going to give them a color of CCC. Okay, and let's make the font size to be 1.1 rand, for example, to make them just a little bit bigger. Okay, we can just like make this a little bit lighter. Oh, great. That looks dope. Don't you think so? So now let's go to the arrow down. We have a class name of arrow down. So arrow down. So we want to give it a position of absolute, and that's gonna take our content to the center, as you can see here. You cannot see now the arrow down because it's over here, as you can see. So we just need to specify for it a bottom from the bottom of 50 pixels, for example. And as you can see here, it's way over here. So we want to make it a little bit bigger, so we can go to the HTML here, font awesome, give us this class name of FA3X, for example, and that's going to make it bigger. So 3x, that's way too big. Let's just make it 2 pixels, 2x. So from the bottom to be 50 pixels. The font size, no, not going to be need for some font size here. So the cursor to be pointer, and that's it. That's it actually. Let's just, since it's going to be, we're going to have actually this unordered list when we will move here. If we take a look at our, this is the final project. So if we go here to the responsiveness, we're going to have this layer, which is going to be absolute as well. So if we didn't give both of them some Z index, we will see the arrow here, and we want to prevent that. So let's give it from now on a Z index of 1, so that we will give this a Z index of 2, which means that it's going to be on top of the arrow. Okay, so far so good. It's looking actually responsive already. I think that there's no need for some responsiveness. I'm just kidding. I'm probably gonna add some responsive design using some media queries for that. Okay, so now we want to add an animation to this arrow key. So let's add at keyframes. Okay, so for the identifier, let's make it, for example, arrow animation. Okay, and what we want to do here, so at 0%, we want to transform it, actually to translate y now to be 0. So here let's add 3 of these, and we want here at 50% of the animation, the translate y, we just want it to be, for example, 100%, and here at 100% we want just to go back to its position. So let's add this animation here. So animation, let's give the name of the animation, which is this arrow animation. Okay, the duration, let's give it 3 seconds, for example, and let's give it that cool effect of the ease in out. If we just here hit the save, you can see that it will go down, go up, but it's going to stop. So we don't want that stop, so let's add infinite. So that is going to go like a loop, a for each loop if you already know JavaScript. So it's going to just loop over and over, and it's going to repeat the code over and over again. So congratulations, we have finished our header. We will get back to it later on when we're going to start our responsive codes. So now let's move on to the about section, and let's first of all add a comment, of course. So let's add a comment of start about section, and this here, it's gonna end the about section. So let's start them here. Let's make just some spacing. It's good to use comments. They are very, very useful. So we're going to start a section, and let's give it an ID of about, because when we click on this arrow here to take us to this, so we want to use an ID for that. So an ID of about, and let's give it a class name of about as well. Okay, so inside the section we're going to definitely have a container, and inside the container we're going to have a div with an avatar. It's going to be our avatar, and inside the avatar here we're going to have an image. And for the src, do you remember that image that we have inside images? And as you can see here, Visual Studio Code could recognize the folder, and it gives us the images, the image that we are looking for, which is the avatar. And here we can put an alternative, which is an avatar, in case if the image didn't show. And as you can see here, so far already, the image is here. Boom, that big, it's so big. Okay, so now let's make a content, the about content. So dot about content, and for the about content here we're gonna have a paragraph, which is gonna be let's say code in Atlas says hi. Okay, and what else are we gonna make? Well, let's make a P, and inside it a lorem ipsum lorem ipsum, and let's make it, for example, 35, 40, let's make it 40, for example. So Alt Shift down, and as you can see here, it's going to generate for us this lorem ipsum. So let's make both, 3 of them actually. Okay, and we will have another thing, which is a button here. A button here that's gonna say, hire me please, hire me. Okay, so this is our website now. Wow, it looks amazing. It doesn't. So let's move on now to some CSS to make it look amazing as well. So first things first, let's start the about styling. So let's go here and let's add a comment, which is start about styling. Okay, so what we have the about container. The about container, and we want to give it a display of grid, and we want the grid template columns to be 2 FR 3 FRs, which means that the image we wanted just to take 2 fractions and the paragraphs to take 3 fractions, the same that we did here. As you can see, this is way bigger than this here. Let's make it a little bit bigger so that you can see here. This is just 2 fractions, and this is here 3 fractions. Okay, so let's go back to our code here, and let's add to it a grid gap, a grid column gap, a grid column gap of 3 ramps, for example. And what else we want? The position to be relative. We might need some absolute position, and we want the padding to be 50 pixel 0. Okay, that's good. So let's give a padding to the whole section. Great. So now let's go to that image. It makes a lot of troubles there. So avatar, avatar. We don't have something called avatar. So the overflow, we want it to be hidden, which means everything that's going to go out. As you can see here so far, we are seeing half of the face. So overflow is going to be hidden, and the display, it's going to be grid. Okay, and let's place the items in the center, which means everything inside it is going to be in the center. What the hell? Center. Okay, so you can't see now any change, but when we're going to set some properties to the image itself, it's going to make sense. So let's take this here, Control C, Control V, image, and the image here, let's give it a width of 100%, which means it's going to take 100%, and boom, here. Do you see that? So it takes 100% of this avatar, which is 2 fractions. And what else we need to make it for it is a min height, so that we avoid a lot of problems of 70%, for example. That's the min height. It will never go less than 70% when it comes to the height. And the max height, please don't exceed, for example, 300 pixels. And let's give it a max width as well, which is going to be 300 pixels. Okay, so that's done. You can use the content, the image contain. I think that there's a property like that, but I want to keep it 100% beginner friendly. So we're using just some basic codes. So now let's move on to those paragraphs, and let's start with about container and the piece, which is paragraphs. So margin bottom, the margin bottom of 20 pixels, and we want the font size to be 0.8 rams. And what else we want to make there? A line height, okay, so that we can separate a little bit, separate between the lines. So the line height of 1.5. Okay, so we can see that. I don't know why. It's about content, not container, the content. So sorry for that, as you can see here now. Okay, And what else we want to make? The color. Let's modify the color to be CCC. I like this color. I don't know why. Okay, so not that. We want to make it a little bit darker, like that. Perfect. But the first child, which is this one here, we want it to be a little bit different. So let's take all this here, and we want the first paragraph. So first child here, we want to make the font weight of bolder. Okay, as you can see here, it's now bolder than his siblings, and we want the font size to be a little bit bigger, which means 1 rem for it. 1 rem, not rems, 1 rem. Okay, so far so good. We're doing great here. So let's move on, and let's go now to the about content. The only thing remaining is the button. So let's go to the button, and let's make the border to be none. Okay, let's take a look at this here. As you can see here, we don't have now a border. So the border to be none, the color we want it to be FFF. We won't be able to see anything. We want the background color to be, we're going to be using variables now as well. So variables, and we have a variable that's called it's called color BTN. And as you can see here, it has that background. What else do we want to make here? Of course, a padding of 15 pixels from top and bottom, and 60 pixels from right and left. Wow. And let's make the text transform to be capitalized. Okay. And let's make the cursor to be pointer. And what else we want to make? I think that's enough. That's enough. Okay. So let's give it. Here we have a cool animation for the button when we hover over it, as you can see here. So let's make that happening. We can simply do that. Let's just select this, and let's just say when it's hovered, which means on mouse, a mouse event. So on hover, we just want the padding to be the same thing, 15 pixels, but we want it from left and right to be a little bit bigger, which means let's give it, for example, 80 pixels. Okay, so now when we're gonna go on top of it, as you can see here, it goes, but there is no transition. So let's give it a transition here, a transition of in 3 seconds, not 3 seconds, 0.3 seconds, and ease and outs as well. So now if we go on top of it, as you can see here, we have this cool animation. So now we will go and start the working process. So let's start the working process. Let's go to the HTML, and let's start the working process. Okay, Alt Shift down as usual, and here let's end it. Okay, my fans, they are going crazy. And let's make it another section here. Let's give it, of course, a class name. So it's going to have a class of working process. Okay, so here inside this section, we're going to just make a container, and inside the container is going to have we're going to have an h1 of my working process, and we're going to have a p tag that's going to have, for example, hello, and this is Atlas coding programming YouTube channel, for example. Okay, and let's go down here and let's make a div for the cards. It's gonna have a div with process cards. So process cards. So for the process cards here, we're gonna have a div that's gonna have card. Inside the card here, we're gonna just have actually a div, which is the icon of the card. So a div with icon, and inside it we're gonna have an I with a class name of FA, for example, magic, and let's make it FA 3x. So let's go down here, let's see what we have. As you can see here, we have this magic wand. So Alt Shift down here, and let's make 4 cards. We want 4 cards. Okay, so Alt Shift down, and here we will have 4 cards with the same icon. And excuse me for that, let's just go back. Before adding, we want to add we have probably some text here. As you can see, we have design, development. So we want to give it, for example, an H4. An H4 that's going to say, for example, design. Okay, so now we can copy these cards, Alt Shift down, 4 of them. So now we can see 4 of them. So here, let's modify this. We don't want magic here. We want, for example, let's have here a laptop. Here's magic. Here, for example, plug. Okay, and here we want to have plain. All right, so let's modify these headings as well. So here we have design, let's say here development. Here let's make it testing, and here let's make it launch, not launch, launch. I'm hungry. Okay, so that's it. I think probably that's it. So now let's make these look way better. Okay, so let's start working process. So start working process, and what we're gonna have here is working process. Okay, working process, the background color, it's gonna be let's say CCC. I like this color, I don't know why, and I always just use it at the first and then I start messing up with the palette. Okay, so let's make it like so, a little bit lighter than white. Okay, so here we have this nice background. What else we want is the text align. Let's make it center so that we have everything in the center, as you can see here. Don't worry, we're going to be using some grids over there. So the text transform, I want it to be capitalized. And what else we want to make is a padding, of course, as usual, of 50 pixel 0. I forgot to add that to all the sections, okay, so that we don't have to repeat it over and over. Always remember one thing, which is dry. Do not repeat yourself. And probably when you're going to start off working with JavaScript, you're going to hear this term a lot. So now let's just keep it with HTML and CSS, and let's go to working process, the H1 first. Okay, so for the H1, we just want to give it a font size of 2 rems. We want to make it a little bit bigger than that. Okay, great. So now let's move on to the paragraph, working process, paragraph. So for the paragraph here, we want to give it a font size of 0.8 rem, and we want a padding of 20 pixels, 0, 30 pixels, and 0, as you can see here. So which means for the paragraph I want it to have a padding from top with 20 pixel, right 0, bottom 30 pixels, and from left 0. Okay, so now let's move on to the process cards. So dot working process dot process cards. Okay, so let's have a display of grid, and let's give the grid template columns repeat 4 times 1 fr. And now you can see them here. We will have one next to the other. So we simply say for this section here to have 4 columns, and each one of them to be with 1 fraction. Okay, so let's give them a grid gap between the those cards. So the grid gap is going to be 1 rems, and we want just the grid auto flow to be row. Okay, so the grid auto flow to be actually rows. Okay, actually I don't think that we need this for here. No, we don't probably need it. So let's just comment it out. We don't need that for here. So let's go to now the working process. The working process cards, and let's now go to the cards. So here working process cards, we want the cards. Okay, so for the cards here, the card, not cards, the card. So for each card we want the color to be white, so the color to be white, and we want the padding to be 3 rem and then 0. Okay, so now you can't see that because we still haven't given them some background colors. So now maybe we can give it a background color, and let's use this here, for example, yellow green. Okay, so you can see that now we're going to give each one of them a different color. And now let's move on to the H4, that we're having, which is this one here. Okay, so the card H4, and for the H4 we want the font weight to be very, very light. We just want 100, as you can see there, and we want the margin top to be 20 pixels. Okay, and what else we want is the text transform to be uppercase, not capitalized. Okay, so now let's get to the icon. And for the icon, we just want to give them a nice animation. Okay, so let's now go here and add an animation. So keyframes, as usual. For the identifiers here, it's going to be cards. Let's just call it cards. And here 0%. And for in 0%, we just want transform. As well, we're going to be using translate y transform. Excuse me, not transition, transform translate y of 0 here. Okay, alt shift down. Okay, so here let's make it at 50%. We want it to go with minus 20%. Okay, and here let's just in 100% to go back to its natural place. So now what we need to do here is just to take everything and add it to the icon. So here control V dot icon. Okay, and the icon here, let's give it an animation. I don't want that, so just an animation. And let's first of all, call the animations. The name that we give it, it's cards. Okay, and let's make it 5 seconds. We want a slow animation. So is in out, and here infinite as well. So Control S, and as you can see here, they go up and down. That's too much. That's too much. Let's just make it minus 15, for example, percent. Okay, so here, as you can see, they want sleep. And is there anything else? No, we think that we should go now to the contact page. Okay, so let's get into the contact. Let's go into the contact page. Excuse me. Let's first go to the HTML here, and let's go now to the contact. Okay, so let's start from here. So start contact. Okay, my fans, my computer fans, they're going crazy. Okay, and contact. I don't know if you can hear them or not. Excuse me if they are bothering you. So here, let's have a section. Let's give it a class of contact. And what else we want to do here? Of course, the container. So the container here, we're gonna have actually, well, let's take a look at the contact. So here for the contact, we want, we have actually 2 columns, and inside these columns we have, inside the right column we have 3 rows. Okay, so let's make that. So first things first, let's make a right column. As I said before, this is, I want to make it beginner friendly. I could use a lot of things here that are not very cool and not very professional. If there is a professional out there, he might be swearing at me right now. Okay, so this is the right column. So let's make a form. No, we don't want an action. Thank you. And for the form here, we want an h4. Let's make it leave a message. Leave a message. Come on, man, leave a message. Okay, so this is the h4. Leave a message. And here we're gonna have let's say 3 inputs. Okay, so the first input, it's gonna be a type of text, and the placeholder, it's gonna say name. Okay, and let's make it mandatory. Okay, the other one, it's gonna have an email, and it's gonna be here email. Okay, so we can see them here already, I think. Yeah, of course, as you can see here. What else do we want to make? HTML is so ugly. So let's make another one. It's gonna be type text, and it's gonna have a placeholder of the phone number. It's mandatory as well. Okay, and then we're gonna have, of course, the text area. Now we don't want a name, we don't want an ID. Actually, we just want some rows to be 10, and we want here a class name of message. I'm gonna be modifying it later, but thank you anyway. And I think it's probably gonna add a placeholder as well. So placeholder, this is gonna say your message. Okay, let's just, why did I make it capitalized there? Okay, so a message, and finally we're gonna have a button. So here, let's make a button, and that button, let's make it saying hire me, please, hire me. Okay, I am really looking for a job. Okay, so here, as you can see here, we have our 3 inputs in the text area and the bottom and the button. Okay, so now let's go here. Now we have in the right column just the form. Let's make a left column. I think that I don't know. This is not the right column. The right column and the left column. Okay, so I mixed everything up. So the left column there, we're going to have a div, and inside the div we're going to have an h4 that's just going to say address. And what else we want? We want a p that's going to have a lorem ipsum of, say, 20. And yeah, that's it. That's it. That's it. That's it. I said that's it. Okay. So here we have an address. So let's make a couple of these here. Maybe one for phone, one for web. So here, for example, it's going to be phone. I'm not going to be wasting so much time with that. You can actually modify that later on to suit whatever you might need. So here maybe you can add 2 paragraphs for the phones and 2 paragraphs. Each of them is going to contain this mail and website. Okay, so we have finished the HTML. Let's get into the CSS and make this looks nice as well. Okay, let's start first the contact. Of course, we're going to be using comments. So start the contact here. Start the contact here, and the first thing we're going to start off with is the contact. So for the contact, it's going to have a background of linear gradient. You know what? Let's take the same background that we make here for the header. Okay, it's going to be the same for the contact. Something wrong here. I don't really know what it is. Okay, so the contact, excuse me, we need to make the contact here, and here we'll have the background. So as you can see here now, we can see our background. We want the color to be white so that we will be able to see it, and we want the padding to be 100 pixel this time, 0. I want to give a lot of space for it. Okay, it looks terrible. So let's go now to the container. So the contact dot container, and for the container here, we're going to give it a display of a grid, and we want the grid template columns to be, just to repeat it, 2 times 1 fr, so that we can see one next to the other, as you can see here now. Okay. And we want, of course, a grid gap of let's say 2 rams. Okay, so we have some space in between them. So this is the cart container. Let's move on now to the what do you want us to start off with? Maybe these h4s. Okay, so let's go now to the contact container h4. What the hell? h4. Okay, thank you. So now this is the contact container h4, and we want the text transform. We want all of them to be uppercase. As you can see here, they are all actually uppercased. This one, all the h4s. Okay, what else we want to add is the font weight to be 500, and we want the margin bottom to be how much we want to give it. Let's say 20 pixels. Okay, so as you can see here now, each h4 is having a margin bottom. Okay, great. So let's now move to the right call. Can just simply get to it. The right call form, and for the form itself, we want to give it a display of flex. Now we will see some horrible things, as you can see. Okay, so take it easy. Well, let's just set the flex direction to be column, not rows. Okay, so as default it's rows, so now we want to make them columns, which means one is on top of the other. Okay, what else? We want to justify the content to be space between. And since we haven't specified a height for the whole form, let's make it 100% so that we can see this space between. And what else we want to add is a background color. A background, we're going to be using a variable we have already defined, which is called the color form. We have a color form here, as you can see here. So as you can see here, we have this background. You can't see it now, but we will be able to see it later when we give it a padding, for example, of 2 rems. Okay, so now you can see this nice color. So now we will have to modify the inputs. So let's go here and let's take the right call form input. So for the inputs, we want them to have a background of transparent, which means we don't want background. They're looking pretty ugly. What the hell is this? Okay. So there's a thunderstorm actually going out there. So border of 1 px solid and CCC. Okay, so you can see this border now. And what else we want to do is we want to make actually the font size to be 0.8 rems, which means a little bit bigger. And of course we want the color to be white. So now when we're gonna type here, as you can see here, we will have a white color, not a black one. And we want the padding to be 10 pixels. So let's give it some paddings. As you can see here, we have 10 pixels for the padding. And we want the border radius to be 0. We don't want any border radius. Okay. And we want the margin bottom to be 10 pixels. Okay. That looks cool now, isn't it? Great. So now let's move on to that message. So right call message, right call, not right, the right column. The right column message, we want the background color to be transparent. We don't want that white color. So we want the color to be FFF, and we want the border to be 1 pixel solid and CCC. Okay, same as its siblings. The padding to be 10 pixels, and the font family, we don't want this. There's a default font family here and we don't really want it. We want a font family of Roboto sans serif. Okay, so now you can see that here it has the same font as the inputs. What else we need to modify? We need probably to modify the placeholders. So let's take this input. We don't want this placeholder for them. So let's take these inputs here. The placeholder for the input and the placeholder for the message as well. Okay. And we will just want this, the color to be white. And let's make it a little bit, as you can see here, it looks like something we have already filled. So let's just make it a little bit transparent, as you can see here. So just give it a nice looking, a nice looking font. Okay, I start to get tired. Okay, so let's go now to the bottom. And let's go to the right call, and form the button. And for the button here, we want a margin top of 10 pixels. You can see that now it's going to go down. And what else we want? We want the background color to be the background color. I am too lazy, so the background color to be a variable of. We have a variable for the button, all the buttons, which is a btn, color btn. Okay, so let's make the border none, and let's make the color to be FFF, which is white. So as you can see here, we just need to give it some padding and let it be 10 px 20. Excuse me for that. 10 px 20 px. Okay, so you can see now that there's the padding here. What else we want to add is a text transform, of course, a text transform of uppercase. Okay, we want the cursor to be pointer, and we want actually the max width to be just 300 pixels. We don't want the full width of the whole container. So now you can't see this max width because we're in small screen already, but if we go to bigger screens, that's not going to go with the form, as you can see here, which is great. So now what else we want to add? We want now to go to modify the left column. Okay, so the left column, the left call, and left column here is going to have a display of flex, as you can see there, but we want here the flex direction as well to be columns, one on top of the other, and we justify the content to be space between. Okay, so as you can see here now, and what else we want to make is for the left call, all the divs inside it, we want them to have a margin bottom of 10 pixels, an extra margin from the bottom, and we want the background color to be of variable of form. We have a color form, as you can see here, it's the same that we give to the form. That's pretty ugly, actually. It's not that good. If there is a UI UX designer out there, he's gonna be swearing at me right now. Okay, so we don't want a color, actually. We want a padding to it. Let's give it a padding of 2 rems, and we want to give it no, let's move on to modify the p tags. So the left call p tags, the left call p tags, what we're gonna have for them is the color. And now I'm gonna probably make it CCC because I want to make them that, we want to give them that color. So the font size, let's make it 0.8 rems. Okay, so that's too small. Let's give them, of course, a line height. A line height of 1.6. Okay, and I think that's it. Yeah, that's it. That's the end of the contact. So now everything remained for us. It's only this footer, which is going to be quick, and then we will get into the responsiveness of this. So let's start the footer. And to start the footer, we're going to just add some comments as well. So start footer here, Alt Shift down, and here let's just end the footer. Okay, so right now what we want to do here is a footer tag container, of course, or you know what, that's going to be in the center, so we don't need a container. So unordered list, and inside the list we're going to have inside the unordered list we're going to have some allies, and some allies are going to have a tags which are some hrefs, and inside each href we're going to have an I with the FA, and then we can add whatever FAs do we want. So for example here, let it be Twitter. You won't be able to see it. Okay, so FA Twitter, and let's add 4 links, or 5 or 6 or whatever you think that you need. This here, let it be, for example, YouTube. This one here, let it be linked in, and this one here, let's make it, for example, Behance. Okay, and of course you can modify these links here to your profile. Okay, so let's go down here, and that's enough for the HTML. Let's get to the CSS. We're not going to be having too much in the CSS going on, so this is going to be styling the footer. Okay, footer, no problem with that. So let's start styling the footer. So for the footer here, the footer, it's gonna have a background color of footer. You have a footer, okay? Here, as you can see here, a variable that's called footer, and as you can see here, we have our links, and we want the color of them to be not CCC, FFF, which is white, and we want actually the text align to be in the center. Okay, the text align to be in the center. All right, as you can see here now, we can see them in the center. And what else we want to add? We want a padding, of course, to the whole footer, which is 50 pixel 0, as you can see now. So now we just need to get to that UL, so footer UL, and let's give it a display of flex, and let's actually justify the content to be in the center. Okay, and let's actually give each a margin bottom of 20 pixels, a margin bottom of 20 pixels. So we forgot about this here. We forget, probably we have all rights reserved. Yeah, that's why. So let's go back to index.html, and let's add that all rights reserved. So let's make a p tag here, and let's call it all rights reserved. Let's just add an at 2021. There is an HTML code for this C here that you can find in the repo here at GitHub. You can find the link in the description. Okay, so styles here, margin bottom for this all rights reserved, and we can now go to the allies. Let's modify the allies. So footer UL allies, and let's give them a padding of 0 pixel, 10 pixel each. Okay, as you can see here, so now we have them. There is a space between each ally. What else we want is a border right of 1 pixel solid CCC. You will see now this right here. As you can see, maybe you can even make it more transparent. As you can see here, this is nice looking borders. So we don't want actually the last one to have that border. It doesn't look that great. So we can just pick this footer UL allies, and the last child. We just don't want any border for it, so none. Okay, now we have removed that. So let's get now into, we didn't add, did we add a color here? We need to add a color to it, not a columns, a color. And as you can see here, we have this all rights reserved. So we have finished our website. Of course, you can add different colors to these here. You are free to modify that as you want. So now let's move on to the responsiveness. So for the responsiveness, we're not going to have too much going on. So the first thing that we need to make it responsive is definitely it's going to be this header. Okay, so how can we do that? So let's add, for example, here a tag that's gonna be called handle responsiveness. I hope I spelled that correctly. So the first thing is at media and screen. Okay, and media screen and the max width. So we want to make a max width okay, of 600 pixels. So when they're gonna reach 600 pixels, what do you want me to do? So for the first thing is the list icons. The list icon, I want the display to be grid, okay, which means these icons over here, we don't want their display. So let's go now to the HTML to show you that. Control F, list icons, list icons. Okay, so where is this list icon that I want to modify here? So it's list icon. Okay, place items in the center. So let's just maybe I forgot about that. I didn't actually do that, but let's have a display grid and let's place the items to be in the center. Okay. What else we want to add is the nav dot container, not the context. The container, we want it to have a width of 90%. Okay, so which means that whenever we're going to go in less than 600 pixels, the container here, it's going to have a width of 90%, as you can see here. So now this is not 90%, it's 75%, but as soon as we will go in less than, as you can see here, in less than 600 pixels, it's going to take 90% of the whole width. So what else do we want to add? So now we want the nav UL here to have a flex direction of column, as you can see here, and we want it to have a flex direction of column. We want the position to be absolute. Okay, but first let's go back to this container. If there are any align of the items, I want it to be in the center. Great. So align items not the center, let's make it unset. Okay, so this is the nav UL. We give it a position of absolute, and let's give it a width of 100%, and let's give it a left 0, and from the top actually to be 50 pixels. All right, and we want actually the height for now to be 0. We don't want to see it, but we will see it as well because we need to give it an overflow of hidden. What else we want is a transition of 0.3s is in out. I think we did a transform here, that's why it's not working. So let's make it a transition of 0.3s is in out. Okay, so the background, it's going to be linear gradient with all what we did before. So let me please bring that, which is this one here. So this is going to be the background for the whole navbar. Okay, perfect. So what else we need to add as well is the z index of 2, which means it's gonna look in. Okay, so let's now move to the nav ul li. So for the li's, we want them to have a padding of 15 pixels, 30 pixels, and we want the text align to be in the center. We want a border bottom of 1px solid, excuse me for that, 1px solid, and let's give it CCC here. All right, let's make it a little bit lighter transparent. You will see that when we're gonna get into some 3 line of codes of JavaScript. So, and just for the margin as a whole, we want it to be 0. Okay, so the nav ul now li's a's. So the nav ul li a's. So for the links, we just want to give them a font size of 1.2 rems. Okay, and what else we want to add is the showNav, a class name called showNav. We will get into that later. This is what we're going to be using for the height of 100 VH. Great, so that looks great. So now we have finished that. For this list icons that we add here, we will go back to the HTML and we're going to add something called the list. We're going to get into the HTML here. We don't want that. We will add something called list icons here, and as you can see, we will go just below this UL, just below this UL here, and let's add a class name called list icon. Okay, so for this list icon, it's gonna have inside it just an I with an FA and an FA of list. You will see it now, as you can see here. Okay, an FA lists, and of course an FALG. Let's make it a little bit bigger. Okay, so now we just need to add some functionalities to this. It's not working. We can't see our nav bar now, but we will be able to see it later on. If we go just now to the files here, let's add a new file and let's call it app.js. Okay, so inside this app.js, since this is not a JavaScript function, this is not a JavaScript actually oriented video, so we're going to just add a function, and this function, let's call it, for example, toggle nav. All right, and this function here, we will have 2 variables. So the first const is going to be the icon, which means the icon that we are going to click on. So document dot query selector, the query selector, and let's add the class name of list icon. So now we have specified the icon. So Alt Shift down, and let's use this here for the list, and we're not going to be using now the list icon. We want to get the list. What is the list? If we go to the HTML here, this is the list, which is our unordered list. So what we want to do here, we want just the icon, which is this. We want to add an event listener to it. So add an event listener, which is a click. Okay, so on click, what do you want me to do? I want you just to go to the list and go to its class list, and then just toggle for me the class name of show nav. So let's say, is that gonna work? No, not show nav. This is gonna show us probably an error. We want it to be a string. So yeah, like that. So this is, we have to run this function, so we can just simply go here and say toggle nav. Okay, and now it's gonna work probably. No, it's not working. I really don't know why. Maybe let's make it a self-invoked function. Oh no, it's not about that. We still haven't linked our HTML with our JavaScript. So let's go here on the bottom, just above the body, and let's make a script src app.js. So now let's see if we click on it. As you can see here, it's working just fine, and our links that are working pretty fine. So we can just, in order to avoid this function like this, we can make it a self-invoked function just by making here some parentheses and here some parentheses as well, and this is going to be a self-invoke function, and it's still working just fine. Okay guys, so here we want just to add some styling to the form, to all this here, and that's gonna be so easy as well. So we want to add that, but this time we won't add it to the same screen size. We want a screen size of max width of 800 this time. So let's add a media here, and for this media we will have a screen and with a max width, this time it's gonna be 800 pixels. So first thing we want to get is the about dot container, and we want the grid template columns this time to be 1fr, and that's it. We have solved this problem here. So we can get just to the about container. As you can see, one is next to the other. So let's go to the image in order to fix that. And we want the width now to be just 50%, as you can see here. Make it a little bit smaller. And a margin bottom of 50 pixel, for example. Okay, so now we have finished our about section. And it's whenever we're gonna go in a screen size which is in less than 800 pixels, that's gonna show on top of our about paragraphs. Okay, we are just few codes to go. So now we want to modify this working process. So working process, the process cards, we just want to give them as well a grid template columns of 1fr. And as you can see here, we can see them one next to the other if we want them to look so, but we don't want them to look so. We want just two each. So let's repeat 2 times 1fr, and that's gonna give them this nice looking layout. So let's modify now the last thing we have, which is the form, and let's go to contact. Okay, contact container. Okay, and we want just the grid template columns to be 1fr, and that's it, as you can see here. So now we have this nice looking website. Excuse me if it takes so long. Actually, this is my first video on the channel. This is my first time actually on YouTube. So excuse me if it takes so long, if there is something that you didn't understand. I am really sorry for that. It's gonna be a lot of other videos that I'm gonna prepare for, maybe way better. So please don't forget to subscribe on the channel, drop a like button, hit the like button, subscribe. Actually, that's gonna drive me and it's gonna encourage me and support me to make more and more videos. If you want to support the channel in order to make some other videos about HTML, CSS, JavaScript, Sass, React.js, Node.js, a lot of videos on the way, you can even buy me a coffee from the link in the description. Thank you so much. See you in the other video. Bye-bye.